Okay, well, first of all, thank you so much for being here. We're very grateful to have you. You're probably going to do a lot better of a job than me in introing you, so why don't you give the folks here a little bit of a background on who you are and Diversio and the great work that you're doing there.
Well, thank you for having me. It is a delight to be back at 111. We'll talk about...
Yes, please.
An alumni founder, so it's been 2 years since I've stepped foot in this building, so thrilled to be here. I'm Laura. I'm the founder and CEO of Diversio. We are an AI platform focused specifically on diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so we help companies around the world, including a lot of big Canadian brands, create a more inclusive workforce through some really neat NLP.
And just before we also dive into a little bit of your background, obviously McKinsey alumni, you had a bit of a law background, lots of schooling, kind of the opposite of what we were hearing before about not doing as many years of schooling, and then, so obviously a little bit on the flip side for you and your pivot, but why don't you just talk about, it's a nice homecoming for you, being back at 111, so if you want to talk about that, because I know that you briefly mentioned that.
Yeah, so we incubated here, I think it was late 2018, briefly before the world shut down. And we had a hard time getting in, I will say. We had to really kind of fight for a spot in here. But it was fantastic. It's a great community of founders, a great support system, a great support team. They really took care of us and kind of showed up during the pandemic. So it's cool. We've kind of outgrown it a little bit. We do more of our business in Europe and the US now, but great to be back.
As you must be very comfortable here. Nice homecoming. So I want to just start with just a bit about the product and Diversio as a whole. So how do you personally define diversity and inclusivity?
It's a great question. I think the question of inclusion in particular was a big problem that we set out to solve. And so when we think about diversity, what we measure in the platform, obviously it's all encompassing. It's about different ways of thinking and different backgrounds and experiences. At the end of the day, though, you need to measure something. You need some sort of metric. And so we look at things like gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, sexual identity. Disability is a big one for us. I don't even like that term, but different ways of experiencing the world, mental health conditions, neurodiversity. So there's a lot of different diversity dimensions, but I think for us, the real innovation was defining inclusion. So what does it mean at an organization and a community to really be included and empowered? And so the metrics that we use to help kind of wrap your head around that topic are things like, culture, if your opinion is valued by your team, flexibility, are you able to balance those home care obligations, workplace safety, are you free from harassment of any kind? We have 6 of them, but I won't go through all of them.
So many multifaceted points to that, things that we don't even consider. So I want to dive into your background because also very unique. You were pursuing being a lawyer and obviously McKinsey alumni, so you transferred to the consulting role. And then you left to go build Diversio. So what I want to know is, obviously it takes a lot of confidence to make that pivot and to leave maybe the security of having a job, especially a consulting role. So where did you get the confidence and I guess what was the desire behind you just deciding to pursue this full time?
Yeah, great question. And when I think back about the day that I walked into my boss's office and said I'm leaving, I literally don't know what came over me. And I think back and I'm like, thank God I did. But I like to say I spent $100,000 proving to my mom that I knew how to make a bad investment, which was law school. Which I value for a lot of reasons. It was not my life's work, and I've spent my career kind of getting further and further away. Not that I break laws, but not that I also don't always follow them. So yeah, it was quite a journey. I think at the end of the day, sponsorship, what a great question, was a huge part of what gave me the confidence. I had people that I worked extremely hard for who went to bat for me and said, look, if you leave and start this thing, I think it's crazy. I don't think it's venture backable. It's not going to work. But I will help you. I believe in you and you'll figure something out. So I knew John Ruffalo actually was someone that I called literally the day after I started Diversio, and I said, I did this crazy thing, I don't know what came over me, what do I do tomorrow? And he said, come to Omer's, I'm gonna set you up literally right next to my office with a a partner's office, which really pissed off the analysts who were kind of in the middle. And he said, I'm not going to give you money because you don't have a company or a technical co-founder. I'll come back to that. But I'm going to help you, and I'll give you the space and the mentorship and the guidance. And so I had like somewhere to go every day, which had a huge impact, just in giving you even the confidence. So I think for me, I knew that I had it in me. I have like no ego and no problem asking anyone for help. I knew that I would go out and kind of ask for it. And then work really hard to hopefully repay the favor.
What would be a piece of advice that you would give to someone who maybe was juggling with the idea of doing that? What's just something that you would maybe tell them to reassure them that they're not crazy and it's probably the best thing for them and for the future?
If you think your idea is crazy and everybody tells you that you're wrong, like that is probably an open market. It probably means a million other people are not trying to do what you do. And if you believe that, you are a logical person and you believe in the insight, go for it. And just kind of hold your breath, jump in, work really, really, really hard, and just have conviction in your idea. And my co-founder, Anya, she likes to call it rejection amnesia. So we literally, I probably made 200 phone calls in the first 6 months of the company where people just told me, go away. I'm not interested, it's really dumb. And then I literally forgot about them until I kind of, saw them on my calendar. So that really, really helped.
I think that's really great advice, and also a perfect segue into, I wanted to talk about your co-founder and just how did you know she was the right person to partner with? How did you end up, I guess, meeting and working together?
So it's a good thing Anya's not here, although I'm going to her birthday dinner after this. I did not, Anya and I think we have different ideas of what happened. I don't think that I hired her. She just started coming into the office every day after we met for coffee, and she just loved the vision, loved the mission, and honestly just would show up and sneak past Omer security, don't tell Omers, literally every day, 9 a.m. she'd be in the office. And within probably 2 months of us working together in that dynamic, it became so clear that we were going to make this thing fly. And it did not matter that she's not an engineer, not a coder, neither of us had ever done product, and we had this big, dreamy vision of AI for inclusion and zero software experience. But we worked so well together. We knew how to solve problems. We knew how to kind of convene resources. And that relationship, that magic, that'll carry you through. So it was clear.
And we were chatting about this before you actually came up here, was you chose not to seek out a technical co-founder. So why did you make that decision and think it was the right one?
Yeah, no, I love that question because I did try. I tried to seek one out and no one would co-found with me. And now in hindsight, it totally worked out. But we were very lucky. Early on, Anya and I ended up hiring a software engineer part-time, what very little money we had, we spent on this one developer who was a master's student at U of T, same as Sahil Narula. He was a newcomer to Canada. And he built our MVP. We launched it actually at Davos somehow, that's a whole different story. Got a lot of really cool attention, got some customers, and ended up hiring a really great team. And my favorite part of that story is Sahil had to go to a real grown-up business for a couple years to get his permanent residency, and the day after he got it, he came to work for us. So it all came full circle.
Perfect. I love that. And there's a gentleman actually here earlier during the community open mic that said he's looking for a co-founder. What advice would you give to those who are looking? How should someone know if they're the right fit, if they don't have a similar story as you do?
I'm a bit of a contrarian. I think I was convinced at the beginning that I needed a co-founder. I was convinced that I couldn't start something without having a partner who balanced out my weaknesses, etc. At the end of the day, you just got to do it. You're never going to find the perfect person. I think vibe and trust is the most important factor, and if you don't have that, it doesn't matter that they balance your skill set. In my view, and I say this to women all the time, because I think women often feel that they can't found a tech company if they don't have a technical background. The reality is there are far few women in engineering programs, and so women also don't often have a network of engineers that they can call up from undergrad and say, hey, do you want to co-found this? Any business, you're going to be good at one thing, and you're going to need to hire for 10 other essential components of the business. Engineering is one part equal to 5 others of starting a company and then scaling it. So if you don't have to hire for engineering because you have a technical co-founder, you're damn well going to have to hire for sales. Because that guy probably doesn't know, like, not to generalize, but different skill sets. So in my mind, it's like, whenever you find someone super talented that you jive with, just hire around their weaknesses.
And just because you touched on your team, a couple questions about Diversio. So how did your team go about building the AI model to measure, the impact of diversity? And how are they taking the data and turning it into actionable advice for people to use?
I love that question because this has been such a journey. Look, I'm a former consultant, so we started selling PowerPoints. And then we, tried to convince people it was a tech product that was, being automated as we speak. And then in the background, we were kind of like aggressively, hiring who we could and engineering what we could. So yeah, early on, it was literally a SurveyMonkey and then a PowerPoint template that we, shipped and sold because people paid for it. And then we took that PowerPoint template, got feedback on the different pages, and that became our dashboard. Like literally the tabs and the pages on the dashboard. And so we were when we were fundraising our Series A, we had investors remark, like, I've never seen like a P&L this efficient, ever. Because how did you kind of like build, and I was like, well, we got real-time feedback. It was, specific comments on pages. And so that helped us build kind of what customers wanted cheaply. And now the vision was always like, okay, look, we know that companies are trying a billion different things to create a more inclusive workplace. Nothing is working. People keep repeating bad programs, bad policies. This is just so inefficient. Nobody's sharing data. Nobody's sharing information. So on the flip side, feedback that people are giving it's difficult to convey. Like, look, I've been harassed. Nobody wants to say that outright, but my manager hit on me at the Christmas party or the holiday party. That is harassment. So our answer was NLP on the employee free text. So when somebody says about their experience, my manager hit on me, be able to like label that, capture it, benchmark it, and then ultimately track and measure what companies are implementing on the program side to figure out what's working in what situation, and then tie those two things together.
And you just mentioned like managers using this obviously for target. So who are you, I guess, targeting or seeking out when you're selling to an organization?
I have to say the CEO. I think anyone who's works in this space, if it's not a CEO priority, it's not going to work. It cannot come purely from HR. The users are often in the HR space. But we did a lot, kind of a clever hack that we did early on is we targeted investors. And we made the case like, look, you're at risk. It was said by Danielle earlier, like, this is good business. If you're invested across a portfolio, we had a big scandal in Toronto a few years ago. A company on the cusp of their Series B folded because there was a harassment scandal. And so we made the case to them, like, look, you need to measure your portfolio companies. Like, you need to know, who's inclusive, who's not, and built a product for that. And that investor now goes to the board members of their portfolio companies, the CEO, and says, hey, you have to use this product. So that's kind of how it works.
And a couple questions, because I want to leave it open to folks here to call out some questions for you. But what would be a great piece of advice you would want to give to another female founder who's, potentially, just like you said, has a great idea? What are some of the great things you've learned and that you would want to share with anyone listening to this conversation?
I think anything that's like tech sector gospel, literally ignore it. If someone's like, oh, you need a technical co-founder, ignore it. If someone says, you need to all work in the office every day till 2 a.m., ignore it. Somebody says, you can't wear XYZ on a panel, ignore it. If you're in the space, the problem and the solution. If you're thinking about it 24 hours a day, what's up. So don't, investors, ex-founders, people, just take the advice, put it through your filter, use it if it kind of passes muster, and then otherwise just do your thing.
Do things differently. I love that. And where can folks get in touch with you and learn more about Diversio?
Please do. We are hiring. We are growing. Laura McGee, Diversio, on LinkedIn. And I think my Instagram is public, but maybe don't do that.
We won't share that anywhere. Okay, well, anyways, thank you so much for sharing your insights. And any questions for Laura? Yes. I was going to say, I'll just
Hey, Laura. I'm just curious about to find out how you met your co-founder and what sort of professional background he or she has.
Yeah, great question. So I met Anya through actually another tech company in Toronto, and it's such a great community. Honestly, kudos to you guys for keeping it going. Word gets around. So I love that you stood up earlier and you said, "Hey, I'm looking for a co-founder." Probably at least one person will remember that or reach out, or you'll find someone, and that kind of spread. And someone mentioned to Anya, who I had met one time, "Hey, Laura McGee is starting a company, you should talk to her." We went for coffee, and from there.
Okay, so it was word of mouth or some online community?
It was word of mouth. Yeah.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Hey, so I'm also building a recruiting tool. So my question is, how did you build your sales process, and how did you find your target market?
Great question. For the first 3 years, it was like, if you will give us money, you're our target market. Like that's it. And actually, Canada Learning Code, I don't know, it was one of our earliest customers. And from there, we built a big footprint in the nonprofit space. So a lot of it was kind of like try and sell to everybody. Early on. This is, again, every VC will be like, don't do that. But for us, we tried to sell it to whoever to kind of narrow down who's actually going to put money behind it. And then when we had enough kind of a pattern, then we'd be like, okay, go ham. So like we asset managers, investors early on demonstrated an appetite for the tool. And so we just like aggressively went after that sector. So it's a combination for me of like, okay, what kinds of companies are going to give you money and what are the common traits that they have? And then just spend all your money there.
Quick question. At the beginning, you launched with like this credit score, a diversity score. Can you tell us the idea behind that and how it was important in your initial growth?
Yeah, so I mean, that was probably the most important piece of the dashboard, continues to be, because people want to be like BuzzFeed releases a list like top 20 best restaurants, like that'll get more clicks than any other article. People love comparing things to one another. So early on, we built a scoring model that basically over-indexes on the experience of underrepresented people. And so your Diversio score is effectively the weighted average of harassment, culture, flexibility, workplace safety. And no, it's actually really cool. So we productized that. I'm talking about it on Bloomberg on Wednesday if anyone wants to tune in, into a database that big institutional investors are using to allocate their investment decisions. So Morgan Stanley, for example, their ESG group based out of London will use our database of publicly listed companies. They'll literally index them, and they'll go to the bottom 25% at proxy season and say, hey, what's up with these bad scores? Yeah.
Quick follow-up question. Do you have people trying to hack the score now?
I mean, you have to put diverse individuals into C-suite positions to do that. And you need to make sure that none of them are publicly outside of your company speaking negatively about your company. So I hope so.
Excellent. So if they hack it, they've done what you want them to do. Love that. Can we get a round of applause for Laura, please?